US tariffs won't affect Canadian real estate? Well, that's a lie. When the cost of materials rise, when jobs shift, when uncertainty enters the market, of course, real estate is not immune. But the question is, how bad could it really get? Now, we're in an interesting spot right now where the US has just supposedly allowed for a 30-day kind of pause period on implementing tariffs on Canada. Therefore, Canada is putting a 30-day pause on implementing tariffs on the United States. But after that 30 days, my phone has been ringing off the hook by everybody who has plans to buy a home, to sell a home. What's going to happen with my home value? Are we going to go into a recession? Now, of course, I am a real estate professional. I'm not an economist. I'm just going to give my opinion of what's going on and what's happening right now and what could potentially happen in the future. This video is not here to stir panic. It's not here to get you concerned, but as someone that watches the market every single day, these tariffs could have ripple effects. They could have ripple effects for buyers. They could have ripple effects for home sellers, obviously, and of course, homeowners. We don't know necessarily what those tariffs might entail yet. The US has not come out and actually said anything about them. The president, Donald Trump, who seems to make things up on the spot and just say things out of thin air. I'm going to try and keep this as respectful as I can to him. But, BC lumber, as an example, that's a really big part of our economy. That could be affected quite a bit. What about supply chain stuff? Who's our lumber going to? And the rest of our industry, like critical minerals and lumber, where's all that stuff even going, or investors' confidence? And, that's just going to go down the tank. So in this video, I'm going to try and break down some of the things that if you're someone who's thinking of buying a home in 2025 or selling a home in 2025, or even if you're a homeowner, what are some things you're really going to want to consider and watch out for? And I've got something that I think is really going to give you a little bit of a perspective check as well, that I'm going to share with you later on. And I'm guessing you're not going to be prepared for this comment, but it's something I really do believe, and I really think you should take at to be important, in your decisions. So, anyways, is this going to be a blip on the radar? Or are we in for a major market shift? Well, either way, you need to be ready, and that's the goal of this video. I want you to come out of that. So, if you want to skip ahead to what I think is going to happen, check out the chapters in the video in the description. But for those that are watching and maybe they don't really understand what a tariff is, I want to explain that a little bit. And this is just from research that I've done. Again, I'm a real estate professional. There's lots of other people much more qualified to talk to you about tariffs, but this is based on everything that I've been able to come up with. So, what a tariff is, a tariff is really a tax. And the interesting thing about the tax is the country that imposes the tariff is really the one that's paying the tax. So, as an example, when Donald Trump implements a tariff, he's really taxing his own citizens on the purchase of Canadian goods. So, lumber, great example. They're just simply going to pay, if it was 25%, they're simply going to pay 25% more for the lumber. The idea of that is that the American buyers, or the people that are having to make, purchase decisions, maybe they don't buy that lumber from Canada. Maybe they, get it themselves through whatever means they might have in the United States. Or, I don't think the goal is really to get other trading partners other than, just keep the jobs at home for the United States. But that's really what a tariff is. So the US has come out and said they're considering a 25% tariff on Canadian goods. And this makes BC exports, this video is for British Columbians. This makes our exports to the US, it can make them much more expensive. In my example with lumber, this just simply means that maybe consumers are making alternate choices as to what they buy. Of course, you watching this video, the funny thing is the US is in a housing shortage, just like we are. It doesn't seem like making lumber and things that they really need. Not only are they in a housing shortage, but prices have gone way, way up in the United States as well. So this is really just going to make BC's exports to the United States much more expensive for the American consumer. Then, of course, Canada. If Canada chooses to retaliate, they're going to put a tariff on to American goods. And this now makes the goods in Canada that come from the United States much more expensive for people like you, like the consumer. So what this does is this really reduces demand. And it's funny to think about, the whole world is already in like crazy inflationary times. And this is really just making it more expensive on everybody. So in a nutshell, though, creating less demand for a product equals fewer sales for that product, which equals an economic slowdown in key industries. So in British Columbia, this video is again for the people of British Columbia and the lower mainland. Well, which sectors might be the most affected? I read a stat, and this was and I apologize for looking down at my notes here, but it was from oh shoot, it's not in my notes here, but I'll put it in the description. But anyways, they estimated that with 25% tariffs on some of the stuff that was being suggested, that it might cost the average family about $1,900 extra per year. Now, that's not a small amount of money. It's also not a huge amount of money. But nonetheless, that doesn't seem like that could be overly impactful, right? But it's really the sectors that are going to be most affected by that and what might happen with those sectors. So, to give you an example, and this is based on some of the research that I had done with this, is the forestry sector, the energy sector, and the mining sector are BC's biggest exports. That's what the province sends out the most of. 57% of those exports, of BC exports, go to the United States. That's obviously a humongous number, right? Manufacturing alone employs 163,000 people in BC. So that is roughly about 6% of BC's workforce is tied to manufacturing. And a tariff really could mean job losses, production slowdowns, and really lower economic activity. I mean, you think of 6% of the population of British Columbia, that's a pretty big chunk, right? That's a lot of people. That's, almost one out of 12 maybe people that are going to be affected by this. So, the question that arises, well, could we just sell our products elsewhere? Do we have to sell them to the United States? And the answer is yes and no. You may or may not know this, but again, in the research that I was doing, Canada has had a strategy in place for quite some time to increase overseas exports by 50% by the year 2025. That's right now. So the challenges with that, though, is building those relationships and building those infrastructure supply chains. Well, it takes time. It's not something that happens overnight. We've got a 30-day pause, which is great. So that gives us a lot more time to be able to say, well, if the United States doesn't want our lumber or they want to put a silly tariff on it, well, where can we send that lumber? Who's going to give us a better market rate, right? So that stuff is all doable, but shipping and logistics are also much more expensive to go outside of the United States where you can just run a truck. And trade agreements take time to negotiate. It's not something that happens overnight. You might remember when NAFTA kind of came out and we had the North American, or sorry, that's the NAFTA, North American Free Trade Agreement, but it turned into whatever it's like Canada, United States, and Mexico, some acronym or whatever. That was a long time, years back, which I'll remind you, the guy in office in the United States is the one that negotiated that. Now he's reneging on it or wants to renege on it. So anyways, that's kind of the problem with what's going on here. How is this going to impact your wallet? Well, we talked about the estimation about $1,900 for an average Canadian family. Hopefully, you're not in an industry that's going to be largely affected by this, if and when it does come. But this is going to add a lot of financial pressure for people at a time where the cost of living is already really difficult. You know what it's like. I mean, mortgage rates have gone up and luckily they're coming down. They've come down relatively recently, but they're still up quite a bit from where a lot of people maybe locked in their mortgages in years past. We know what the cost of groceries is. We know what the cost of everything is. I mean, everything is just so expensive. So obviously adding extra weight to an already burdened set of shoulders is not ideal, right? And that's really going to push down economic activity. So here's kind of the questions is like, how will this affect the real estate market? Whether you're a buyer or a seller or a homeowner doesn't necessarily matter. If tariffs do eventually get introduced, it's going to make the cost of living much more expensive. So, what is the number one tool that the government has to stimulate an economy if we do get pushed into a recession, which a lot of people are projecting we will go into a recession if that is to happen, if those tariffs are to be introduced. So, what might happen? Well, their number one tool is interest rates. Okay. And that's where the Bank of Canada comes into play. So when someone buys a home, and I don't remember recall where these numbers came from, but it was estimated that in British Columbia, it's somewhere between $80,000 to $90,000 gets pushed back into the economy when somebody purchases a home. So if somebody buys a home, sells a home, whatever, they're paying for notaries or lawyers, real estate professionals, mortgage brokers. They're maybe buying a new couch. They're hiring a painter to come paint the kitchen. They're getting a new toilet installed. They're doing some landscaping in the backyard. They have to put up a new fence. They have to install an EV charger in their garage. There's so many things that go along with buying a new home where people buy the home or people sell the home and then they need to get services to help them get through the transaction or to help get them to the home to where they want. So when the Bank of Canada adjusts interest rates, what happens is that actually pushes money back into the economy. It gets it out of your bank account where it's sitting nice and protected, and it's out giving it to other people because they're working and they're adding labor to the market. So what would happen if the Bank of Canada was to do this? Well, let's say interest rates were to drop because tariffs are introduced. What could happen? And it's funny because we've got a playbook about this that it did happen. This exact kind of scenario actually did happen back in 2020. What happened in 2020? Well, that's when COVID really kind of became a big problem, a big thing. And obviously, it was a big thing. I don't want to downplay that by any means, but that's when the bank went into emergency level interest rates. You might recall the Bank of Canada's overnight lending rate was at 0.5% at one point, which was incredible. Right now it's at 3%. So that's 2.5% lower than where it is right now. So what happened? Well, people at that time during COVID, they were worried about employment. Many did lose their jobs. People had to stay at home. They weren't able to go out and spend money on things like movies and sporting events and all that sort of stuff. The whole economy shut down. You were around for that. If you're watching this, you knew that. You lived through that. So we all thought that everything was going to tank, right? It didn't. What happened with real estate prices when the Bank of Canada adjusts interest rates to emergency rate levels to try and stimulate the economy? Real estate absolutely took off. Now, there was lots of people looking to get out of downtown cores and go find more space. They were working from home. There's all these sorts of reasons that happen. But there's really three primary drivers what drive the housing market. And those three primary drivers are number one, supply and demand. Number two, the bank rates. That obviously has a huge impact. If money's cheaper to borrow, people are going to borrow because it makes sense, right? And the third is what's going on with the economy. General economics and general things going on in the community and whatnot. Well, obviously, tariffs is a really big thing going on with the economy, but you still have two other factors in there. You have the supply and the demand. We know the demand is definitely there. And if the second thing, which is interest rates, go significantly down, my question to you, I'm not here to predict the future, but I'd be interested in what you think. Anything could happen, right? Absolutely anything could happen. But if the Bank of Canada was to react to these tariffs to avoid Canada and Canadians and British Columbians and everybody watching this video from going into a recession, and they reacted by adjusting the interest rates to try and stimulate the economy, to get people spending money, buying homes, that sort of thing, what might that do, right? What might that do to the market? I don't know. The market might go up, it might go down. It's really hard to say, but we have seen this before in 2020, and you probably know the result of what happened when the interest rates did get dropped like that. So, I guess the question and what I want to leave you with is what should you do right now? If you were planning on making a move in 2025, whether you're a home buyer or a home seller, well, number one, I want you to think about your employment. Are you going to be affected substantially by tariffs potentially coming in? Are you in an industry where you think you might lose your employment? Obviously, that's one of the biggest factors, right? We want to make sure you can pay your mortgage so you're not going to find yourself in a negative position. Number two is you really want to stay informed. And I want you to take this to heart. I mean, this is the type of thing that people are, find really easy to argue with. The idea that housing prices might go up if tariffs get imposed. I want you to think back to COVID. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but I want you to think about a time where we thought the whole world was shutting down. People were unemployed. People were worried about their work. They didn't know what the future looked like. And look what happened as a result of that. So you need to stay informed. You need to pay attention to this. You need to see what the action and reactions are in the market. If tariffs get introduced, what is the reaction? Is the reaction by the Bank of Canada, whatever they might do? So you definitely need to pay attention to that, and you need to run your numbers. Obviously, you want to talk to experts. All of the stuff that has been coming out from our financial planner clients, from any of our investment clients, anything like that, it's saying don't panic. Don't turn your whole world upside down based on the news coming out of the United States. I want you to focus on, does it make sense for you and your family? Do you have employment that is stable? And do you have any concerns about that employment? And really just pay attention. Let's see what happens. But if it's in the cards and it makes sense for you right now, nothing might happen, right? We don't know. But you need to make sure you're doing what's right for you and your family. So stay informed. That's the big thing. I know this is a big shift. I want to do a video that's a little bit different than my normal ones, but I thought this might be valuable for people out there. I would love to hear your comments about what you think may or may not happen. You can leave those down below, and we'll look forward to hopefully catching you on the next video. Okay. Thanks.